Good morning and welcome to Wellness Wednesday. You're stuck with just me today. And yet, I'm really excited to share with you because today I am going to be covering the three lessons I learned from the hardest year in my life. And to be honest, it's been really hard to condense these down to just three. And yet, I'm going to do my best, but I might have a few more than three. We'll find out. This year has been extremely challenging, and for a variety of reasons that I don't need to rehash. The biggest of which was losing my mom after a 60-day battle that had so many different ups and downs that I felt like one of those punching bags that I used to have as a kid that we would get knocked down and pop back up and knocked down and pop back up. And it was really hard because of obviously losing her, and now the permanence of that sets in. We're walking into the holiday season and not being able to talk to her or not being able to enjoy another one of her Christmases is really, really hard. And it's hard to watch what it's done or is doing to those that I love. And that sense of helplessness, that realizing there's only so much I can do, so much pain I can alleviate. But that really kind of leads me into my first lesson, which is when you are in pain. And I don't mean the pain of just losing someone. It could just be your existence, right? You're in a state of what's called suffering. Now, the thing about suffering is that suffering is typically the result of one of two things. And I would encourage you to write this down because it's a really great tool that you can use to coach yourself. If I'm suffering, it's because I either have something that I don't want, I have something that I don't want, or I want something that I don't have. And so when we look at this, right, both of those two scenarios can create pain. They can create emotional, and emotional pain will eventually seek expression through physical pain. And when we're in pain, what's often the case, at least for me, is that I begin to seek pleasure. Right now, pleasure is fleeting and it can show up in a lot of different ways. And the junk food of pleasure is instant gratification. But what I learned this year is that the solution to pain is not pleasure, it is purpose. Finding purpose in our pain is ultimately the way out. And the way that we mine purpose from pain is through perspective. And what I'll share with you is that anytime that I find myself in a season of pain, in a season of struggle, I always find purpose because I think of it through being a student, a teacher, and a coach. See, what I've learned about myself is that the best version of me shows up when I live in a loop. So, what I'd like for you to do is draw an infinity symbol. An infinity symbol is just the number eight laying on its side. And when I think about me showing up as the very best version of me showing up in the world, whether that's at home, my health, with my businesses, whatever, I'm always going to live in this loop of first, if in that first section, write the word student. I'm being a student. And to me, being a student means that I am studying, I am researching, I am learning, I'm growing, right? And then I take that knowledge and I become a teacher. See, that right side of the infinity symbol is teaching. And I don't know where I got this, but it's probably from my family, my mom, my sister, my many of my cousins, aunts, uncles. People are even my wife's side of the family, her sister and her dad are all teachers. We come from an education background. And so I don't know if that's nature or nurture, but I just have this high desire to teach. And so when I'm in that loop of student and teacher, I find myself just being the best version of me. Now, where they intersect there at the very middle, that's what I call coaching. Coaching to me is what happens at the intersection of being a student and a teacher. Now, how this relates to mining purpose out of pain using perspective is that if I find myself in pain, I always think about I'm a student of this, and my job is to take this test and turn it into a testimony that eventually someone that I cross paths with is going to have a similar challenge, and if I can systematize this, if I can break it down through my awareness, through my acceptance, through my activation, then I can become a teacher of this, but not from a place of theoretics, right? It's not necessarily something that I read in a book somewhere, but from a place of experience. And I think that people, they enjoy being taught by those who are leading through their own experience. It doesn't mean that my scenario has to be just like theirs. It doesn't mean that we have to have had the exact same life events, but they enjoy it when someone can kind of come alongside them and say, I don't know exactly how you feel, but I have an idea, right? And that pain from purpose to perspective is ultimately going to give you a lot of pleasure, and not the kind that is fleeting, but the type that is fulfilling. You know, waking up in the morning and knowing in your head and in your heart that your work has impacted the lives of other people from a place of authenticity is one of the greatest gifts that you can ever be given. And you know, all have probably heard me say this a million times, but I believe in the infinite life. And infinite life is one that's going to be pointed at ultimately for pursuits, and they build on each other, right? And it's worth repeating. So write these down. If you're going to live the ultimate infinite life, your life is going to be in the pursuit of one, learning as much as you possibly can, and two, growing as much as you possibly can, so that you can love as much as you possibly can, so that you can give as much as you possibly can. And see that giving piece, it's interesting. I'll never forget a conversation I had with Jordan Davis, who's the director of training here and somebody that has taken my freed life out on the road. That one day she popped up and basically said in a coaching conversation, I'm good. You know, I live where I want to live. I vacation where I want to vacation. I drive what I want to drive. I'm good. And now I'm going to make my business about helping those that help me get theirs. And you know, I finally reached that point. I call it flipping the switch from success to significance, where now, in order for me to get myself moving, I don't think about fancy hotels or amazing vacations. I've done all that stuff. And to be honest, it's cool, but it's fleeting. It's not that cool. And I think that a question that I've been asking myself is, you know, the things that I want, did they come from my maker, the person, the force, the universe, God, or did they come from marketing? Because man, we get marketed some ideas that, and we pursue some ideas that really don't fulfill us. And so now when I think about the purpose of my life, it's always going to be, for at least this season, through the lens of protecting and providing. I always think first of like, how can I pass along ideas that protect people or provide people with what it is that they need to navigate the circumstance of life. And I get great fulfillment out of that. And so the first lesson that I would give to you here, and I get that you might be experiencing pain and it could come and go, but I don't believe, at least for me, that the answer to pain is pleasure. I think the answer to pain is purpose, and purpose is mined through perspective, right? And I think there's another question in there that I would invite you to really think about. And it kind of leads me into the next big lesson that I learned this year. But what is it that brings the best of me into the world? What are the ideas, the circumstances, the environments that bring out the very best in me? And you know, another thing that I've shared with this group, but it's a big lesson that I learned this year, is that you know, thoughts are things. They are energetic matter, and your thoughts ultimately do create your world. And one of the questions that I've been asking in these types of conversations, especially in a coaching conversation, is where do your thoughts originate? Where do your thoughts originate? Where do they actually come from? And if you've been through my free life, you know that they come from your programming. They come from programming, the software of your head and your heart. And we have the ability to influence that software, by the way. But this whole thoughts or things idea has really helped me because I got really matter of fact about the thoughts that don't serve me anymore. And the way that I put this, the metaphor that I use is there's a little girl that's a friend of my youngest daughter who comes to our house and she has a severe nut allergy. And it's very serious. It's something that when she's around, we have to be very cognizant of, right? She can't have peanuts, can't have almonds, and she carries a little EpiPen on her back. And her mom, every time she comes over, reminds us, rightfully so, about this nut allergy. And, one day I was just kind of observing her and it hit me, right? Like she didn't choose to be allergic to nuts, but if she does accidentally eat them or somehow ingest them, it produces inflammation in her. Her mom has told us that she gets really hot, her face gets blotchy, and if it's a severe reaction, her throat can close up, right? It produces inflammation. And if thoughts are things, then we can be allergic to thoughts, just like we're allergic to food. And what I really took away from this year is just noticing what are the thoughts that create inflammation in me. And I'll tell you, one of the ones that really gets me is comparison. When I start comparing myself to other people, and largely it's the people I don't even know. Most of you know that I have several big heroes in the world, but two of them are Tony Robbins and Tim Ferriss, right? And when I look at the success that they've created and I start comparing myself, especially at their age, right? Like when they were, I should say, when they were my age, like Tony Robbins and Tim already had these best selling books and all this stuff, right? And so I can get caught in that cycle of comparison. But then I realize that this thought process is creating inflammation in me. It's not helping me bring out the best in me. It doesn't help me feel and act in the best way possible. And so I just got really matter of fact about it. In fact, I was teaching to a group. It was about 3 weeks ago. It was a good friend of mine, Chuck Johnson. And Chuck has an amazing team in Asheville, North Carolina. And what I was sharing with them is if you think about your mind like a party, right? And let's just say that you want to have an amazing party, whatever an amazing party might be for you. And someone locally has this venue, right? And this venue is it's like a nightclub. It's beautiful, and they say, hey, you can have this many guests. It might be 50, 100. You may know a lot of people, right? And so if you're going to have the best party, then you're going to have a very specific invite list, and you're going to send that out to people, and you're going to invite them to your party, right? Now, if you've ever seen an exclusive nightclub has a doorman at the door, a bouncer at the door, and then if it's a really great nightclub, there's usually a waiting list, right? Or a waiting line, these people standing outside. And essentially what's happening is the doorman is looking at each one of these people and making sure that they're on the list because this is your party, right? You're going to have a great party. And so if certain people show up that weren't invited, that might be disruptive to the party, then they're not going to come into the building. They're not going to come into the nightclub. And so first, I want you to understand that there are certain thoughts that you are letting into the nightclub of your mind. You're letting into the party of your mind that are disruptive, and listen to what I'm about to say, they create inflammation, not ignition. See, I want you to have a mind and a heart that is on fire. And when you allow certain thoughts into your head that create inflammation, just like that little girl, if she eats almond butter or peanuts or whatever, her throat closes up. The same thing happens in your mind. It's an allergic reaction. You are allergic to certain thoughts. Now, if at first we want to have this amazing list, right? We want to be clear. And that's what I was saying is like, what brings out the best in me? When I think about what brings out the best in me, I already shared it with you, being a student, being a teacher, being a protector, being a provider. And so if I'm going to get the best of myself, I got to invite those thoughts into my party. Now, here's the other thing is that sometimes you might have a thought like a person comes into the party, maybe they overconsumed a little bit, right? Maybe they had a little bit too much to drink and they're out there on the dance floor, or they're just being super dramatic. Well, if you're at an exclusive nightclub, what's going to happen is you're going to go find security. Security's going to grab that person and remove them. And so I want you to just notice that if there are people, there are thoughts walking around inside of the party of your mind that are not serving you, they are creating inflammation, not ignition, then remove them. Be that matter of fact about it. Just like her mom has to be matter of fact about her allergy to nuts, be very clear about the allergies that you have to certain thoughts and ideas that don't bring out the best in you, and you can be that matter of fact. In fact, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about a month ago. I was driving and he called me, and what I really encouraged him to use as the litmus test, inflammation versus ignition, is, does this work for me? Does this work for me? And so if a thought, an idea, a process, whatever doesn't work for you, get it out of the nightclub and go find one that does. So that second lesson, the one that I really want you to take away from this, is that thoughts are things, and that thoughts, just like food, can produce allergic reactions inside of us. And I want you to be very, very clear on the thoughts that produce inflammation versus the thoughts that produce ignition. What are the thoughts that are going to bring the best version of me into the world? And this is my work as a coach, to really find what brings out the best in people and consistently put that in front of them. It's really amazing what can happen when you live that over time. It's really amazing. The last thing that I'll share with you, as it relates to the hardest year of my life, is that I believe each and every one of us, especially in a capitalistic society, has a moral obligation to make as much money as you possibly can. I think that America can be a great place if you have money. If you don't, it is brutal. And one of the biggest joys, I don't know if I'd call it a joy, maybe sources of pride that I will have for the rest of my days, is that when my mom was in the hospital, she asked us to provide round the clock care, and the hospital that she was in did not provide that. They had on-call nurses, but she wanted somebody in the room with her. And I think that there were multiple reasons for that. One, just to tend to her needs, but also because I think she would get anxious and afraid and lonely and wanted to have somebody in the room with her. Well, as a family, we could only accommodate that for so long before we were all burnt out and tired. And so what we did is we put together a list of amazing nurses that were coming to the hospital after their shifts or on their days off. And by the way, nurses are some of the most amazing, underappreciated people in the entire world. They are amazing. They are amazing. They're like teachers, just completely underappreciated for the impact that they have on our society and the people that they get to serve. And yet, having the financial ability to, and I wasn't the only one, there were members of our family that helped out, right? We all contributed as much as we could, but having the financial ability to provide that to her was one of the biggest sources of pride. And we had two people that sat with her, two different nurses who both reached out to us and said, "We've never seen any family care for a family member at the level that you all did, and you should feel really proud of that." And we're really proud of it. Now, obviously, we wish it had worked out differently, but you have a moral obligation to make as much money as you possibly can in this society, because money is good for the good it can do. It is a tool that magnifies who you are. It doesn't change who you are. And in the absence of all the time in the world, if you intend to make a big impact, money is the greatest source or piece of leverage that you ultimately have. And what's really cool, especially if you're an entrepreneur, is that you set your own wage. And I'll never forget one of my all time, if not my all time favorite podcast episode is between Joe Rogan and Naval Ravikant. Now, Naval is somebody that I have found to be a great source of wisdom, both from the perspective of, business and just insight and strategy. And yet at the same time, someone who is equally committed to his own happiness and fulfillment on that journey. And one of the things that he said was that early on in his career, he just decided to set a ridiculously high hourly wage. And I think at the time he said it was like $5,000. Now today he's worth, I don't even know how much. He might even be close to tipping the scale to being a billionaire. I have no idea. And yet back when he first did this, that was an astronomical wage to him. And the whole idea was just act your wage. And this, he wasn't the first person that shared this with me. In fact, it was Ben Kinney, who many of you probably know. He's the co-founder of Place, the owner of Brivity, one of the biggest real estate agents on the face of the planet. He's the one that I originally heard this from, but the way that Naval explained it really stuck in my mind. And so the thing that he said is that when you think about time being the most precious commodity you have, when you set a high hourly wage, you're placing a premium on your time. And somewhere around along the road, it might have been Alex Hermosi. Somebody said, "You will always pay for things with what you value least. You will pay for things with your time, or you will pay for them with your money." And so all these ideas connect, right? And what I want you to understand is first, you set your hourly wage. And then the world, if you don't come off of it, if you will be patient, if you will be consistent, if you will be gritty in the pursuit of that, eventually you'll get there. You set your hourly wage and set a premium on it because there's a lot of people in the world that need your help. There are a lot of people who need your help. In fact, I was talking to my sister over the weekend. She works at one of the lowest income high schools in the state. And she was telling me about a kid in her classroom that his dad is a drug addict. And this kid is with his mom and two siblings, has to ride his bike every day, 20 minutes there and 20 minutes back to his job, is a full-time student who gets A's and B's and is one of, I don't remember the classification, but he's a really good at band. And you just think about like the fact that he has to work to support his family at such a young age. And so it's people like that to me that money is there to bless and serve, right? For them to understand that there are people in the world who recognize what they're doing, and that people do in fact care, right? So put a premium on your time, and also understand that the world will never respect your time more than you will. You are the one that sets the value to that. You also set the value of yourself, right? One of the things that I share with people often, and you've probably heard me say it, is you are the appraiser of your own worth. We each have an appraisal report that is self-generated. No one but you generated it. Now, it may feel that somebody else generated it, but if you do the work, what you're going to find is that that was just your interpretation of their behavior. And we know this to be true, by the way. I can prove it to you that it is self generated, because if you have a kid, or you know a kid, or I put a kid in front of you and they actually were able to show you their self worth appraisal report, you would never, ever allow them or teach them to let someone other than them write on that report. You would never let them you would never allow them to allow another person to define them. You wouldn't do it, would you? So this is what I want you to understand, is that you have a moral obligation to make as much money as you possibly can for the good it can do. And your minimum wage is going to be set by you. Once you set it, act it and stick with it until you achieve it. And just understand that no one will value your time more than you. You've got to put a premium on it, and forget everybody who doesn't want or doesn't believe that you should be doing that or wants to tear you down in the pursuit of it. So there you go, my free life community. Those are my three big lessons from the hardest year of my life. So um, the first one is that the answer to pain is not pleasure, it's purpose, and purpose is mined through perspective. Number two, you sorry. Number two, um, you have the ability to choose your own thoughts. Thoughts are things. Pay attention to the ones that create ignition versus inflammation and be matter of fact about it. Does this work for me? And if it doesn't, just like a security guard is going to remove a disruptive attendee at your party, remove that thought, bring it out of your head. And then lastly, you have a moral obligation to make as much money as you possibly can because there are a lot of people that need your help. Set yourself up to where you are good. You've got yours. You're living the lifestyle you want. And then get about the business of flipping the switch from success to significance, where you're going to help as many people as you possibly can to get theirs. Thank you all for being here. And I trust that you got a lot out of this. And we need your help. We want to grow our message. So if there's somebody out there that you feel needs to hear this, then invite them to the Facebook group, tag them in this post, and make sure that they listen to it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Live free. Bye bye.